Welcome all of you to our conversation with Kristin Wright, California Director of Special Education. I'm Maria Dane, Executive Director of Parents Helping Parents, a nonprofit parent training and information center located in Silicon Valley, where we build bright futures for children with special needs through empowering their parents. For those who aren't familiar, parent training and information centers are funded in part through the IDEA Act passed over 40 years ago. And tonight you're going to hear from all of your California parent training and information centers. DREDF, Exceptional Parents Unlimited, Matrix, PHP, Warm Lines, Support for Families and Children with Special Needs, and TASK. Collectively, we work with tens of thousands of parents every single year on their child's IEP, 504, and rights to special education. And nearly all of our staff are themselves raising children with special needs. We provide objective information and resources to support parents and youth in working in partnership with their schools to establish and meet high expectations for children with disabilities. As COVID-19 has taken root in our state, schools and families have had to adjust to just extraordinary changes. Many of our families have been calling Parents Helping Parents and partner agencies as they struggle to understand what is happening in their child's special education program. We reached out to State Director Wright to see if she could speak to parents throughout California from her point of view about what's happening and what we can expect. And we are thankful that she accepted our invitation to join us tonight. So I would like to introduce you to our speaker, State Director Kristin Wright. In addition to being our State Director, she is also a parent herself of a child with special needs, or a young adult with special needs now. She has served as State Director since 2016, has a teaching credential and a master's in special education. She's known for her passion to improve outcomes for children with special needs. Unfortunately, there will be no time for additional questions from our audience tonight. However, if you if you have questions that aren't answered, you can put them in your chat and we will pass them along to the California Department of Education for you. All questions tonight were prepared by parent centers based on questions they have been hearing from our families. Some of them are kind of doozies, but Kristin, she said we could ask all of them. So she's a brave lady. So let's get started. And now I'm going to turn things over to State Director Kristin Wright. She's going to give you an overview for a few minutes on how she sees the state of special education in California. And then we will start questions and answers with our parent centers.
Thank you, Maria, and good evening. As you all can see, I'm here in Sacramento in my home, in our back room, which I know, many of us are working from different parts of our house. We switch around rooms in our family. We have a pretty small house. But it's great to see everyone, or to actually know that you're out there, but I can't actually see you. So it looks like I'm talking to myself into the camera. But I will imagine you and your 3,000 faces and your beautiful children that you are spending a lot of quality time with, just like I am. So it is really an honor to have an opportunity to talk with you. And Maria's right. I wouldn't hesitate for a second. My favorite thing to do in this role as State Director is to talk with parents and to share whatever information that I have, because as a parent, I know how important information is. Information is everything, especially when we're not really sure what the guardrails are, when things are so different than we're normally used to doing. We're advocates for our kids, and we go out and we knew kind of what we were dealing with. During this pandemic, it has been very challenging. And I will also say personally, it's been very challenging in my own home with my own daughter's program. And I'll tell you a little bit about her in a minute. But in my book, really, you are all kind of the unsung heroes along with our essential workers in this pandemic. And I just want to say thank you. I know nighttime can be a busy time at home, but thank you for tuning in. And thanks so much to our parent training and information centers and our family empowerment centers, who I know are talking every day with all of you, and that are also bringing questions back to the department as working as our key conduits. I also want to say that we work very closely with our SELPA directors, our special education local plan area directors. And as you know, or may know, every single district in the state of California belongs to a SELPA. And those SELPA directors are there also to assist if you have something going on that you can't get help with in your own district. And I know they would appreciate, and I hope they're listening to get a shout out as well. They're key partners in our state because we have almost 2,000 between districts and charter schools, local educational agencies in California. That's a lot. And it serves these agencies or these schools and districts serve more than 795,000 students with disabilities. It's a lot of IEPs. It's a lot of things to pivot on a dime when you have something like a pandemic, when we've spent a lot of time as families building these plans that many of us spend hours and hours working with our districts and schools and creating for our students. So for those of you I have not had the opportunity to meet, and I see a few of you in the chat that I recognize, I've been in this role almost 4 years. I was originally guided by the universe into this work, into special education, when I was blessed with the birth of my daughter, Shelby, who was born with significant disabilities. She turns 22 this summer. And so I, like many of you, am worried about what happens when we're transitioning in the middle of a pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. I also, like many of you, tried to understand how to support her and understand what the supports were so that I could advocate for her. And, that's how a lot of us get into this work. We learn so much about the system that suddenly the system kind of engulfs us. And so it's been really an honor and privilege to do this work the last 4 years. One thing that makes this pandemic exceptionally challenging is that we are highly dependent, many of us, on providers, on people who work with our children and our students in order to be a lot of their accommodation. It's, for many of us, we have children who can access online learning, who do well with interacting with different types of assistive technology, and the digital space. And then there's others of us that our children really like that one-to-one interaction with people in person. That has been extremely challenging. I know in our house, our community is our playground where my daughter gets her transition services, and trying to adjust those into the home environment. She's kind of wondering, where are the people that I normally see every day? And I like you, Mom, but I'm not sure that I really want to spend this much time with you. So, I know all of our situations are different, but I do recognize some of the struggles that we all have, trying to work, trying to take care of our kids, and worried that our kids are going to lose time, when we've spent so much time trying to get them up to speed and getting them as close to grade level as we can. So I also understand that you have some questions for me that have come into a lot of the parent training and information centers. There might be some that I cannot answer, and not because I don't want to, but some of them are new questions that we don't have the exact answer to yet, and they're developing. And also, there may be questions that are really individualized to individual students in their own context. And so knowing all that, I, as Maria said, I am happy to answer all the questions that you provided, and I will do the best I can. And if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat so that we can take those questions back and try to get them answered. We'll feed that information back, and if we can add some to an FAQ or some to provide you additional information, we will absolutely do that. In the meantime, if you have questions or concerns, the best place to go is first, obviously, to your teacher, and then to your school principal, and to your district. And then if you don't feel like you're getting the needs of your child met, it'd be great for you to go to your SELPA director, because that is one of the reasons that they are there, is to help ensure that everyone in every SELPA region, all the children, are receiving their free appropriate public education. And again, FAPE in the LRE in COVID is looking different than FAPE in the LRE in our traditional schedule in school buildings with all of our, favorite instructional aides and related service providers that we get to see in person. So I've had to adjust some of my own expectations around, my own providers who are also trying to take care of their family and students too. Now, that said, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is still in place, and that's in place for good reason, to protect and ensure that students with disabilities continue to get access to their education. But it does look different during COVID, and so that is one of the things that we'll talk about within some of our questions. But I really want to make that clear, that it's not a comparison between what we were getting 6 weeks ago, in the sense of this is all very different. So I know our PTIs will be sharing some specific resources and guidance with you, I believe, at the end. And I recommend that you also continue to visit our CDE COVID-19 webpage, which will also provide those links to you as well. And I'll stop talking and I'll go ahead and we can head over to the questions if you want, Maria.
All righty, I think we're starting with Sid.
Hi, Kristin.
Hi, Sid.
I'm Sid Van Korsel. I'm from the Warmline Family Resource Center here in Sacramento. And Kristin, parents in our rural areas are reporting difficulty with Wi-Fi connectivity. Some of them can't even get cell phone access. And parents in the urban areas are having difficulty just with technology by itself around distance learning. So what advice do you have for parents struggling with technology at this time?
Yeah, we've heard that as well. And there are definitely still places that we have been reported to us in the state that still are struggling with connectivity, with getting enough devices to our students. And even some of our districts have talked about wanting to make sure, they've actually gone on visits to make sure to check on some of their families because they haven't been able to get a hold of them. And so there are a couple of, at the statewide level, initiatives going on. One, our superintendent of public instruction has been working on a task force that has actually been working with some of our big entities, our tech folks in California and others, around getting more access to devices. And it's called Closing the Digital Divide. It's with Senator Leyva as the co-chair. And I think they met today again at 4:00. And I'll have to report back to you on what happened in that meeting, because it just happened. But it is at the top of his list of making sure that everyone has a way to get connected. And so that is something that the state is working on. Noted that it's only been 6 weeks, if you can believe it, since this all started. It seems like a really long time at my house. I don't know about yours, Sid.
You bet.
But it is an all hands on deck at the state level, both working across entities between the governor's office, our superintendent, and the legislature to try to at least close that divide. I do know some of our districts have been sending actual buses around with hotspots, and I think more are going out this week to find those, to go to those areas that are having trouble with connectivity. And for the ones that are continuing to have connectivity issues, we do have other means that, we've heard of. We've had teachers going out to deliver different kinds of curriculum and activities for students. I was talking to someone up north who said that the school bus was coming around and delivering curriculum and delivering lunches to students. And so it's very localized, but it's also being worked out at the state level. So districts can reach out to the state to let us know what their need is. And the superintendent and our staff at the department have been working every single day to try to continue to connect more and more students every day. So thank you for the question, and more to come on that as well.
Thank you, Kristin.
It's like a surprise seeing who's going to come on to give me the next question.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. It's me. So I'm Steve from Matrix Parent Network, and I have two questions, both from parents. The first is from a parent of a 14-year-old son with ADHD, anxiety, and some behavior issues. And the parent is asking, Distance learning has increased my son's anxiety. If we can't get a social emotional assessment for him right now, how can we get him the counseling service that may help him access distance learning? And what are the alternative options for a family to get a referral to mental health?
Yeah, so that we are hearing, and we know that this is not good for students with, this does heighten anxiety, and we've heard from a lot of parents and families, especially that their kids had a lot of behavioral support in the schools as well. In order to get an assessment, if you are not feeling like you're able to get one through your district, I would recommend contacting your local SELPA, and they can help intervene and sort of make that connection. Because again, that is one of the things that they assist with. And all of our SELPAs are extremely knowledgeable about the regionalized services. And their whole job is to make sure that to share services and to make sure there's enough services for the region. Also, just to remind you, as a parent, you always have a right to call an IEP team meeting at any time. And so those can be held virtually. And those, the IDEA, again, is still in effect. So if you're feeling like there's something in your IEP's not for a while, but you're kind of on a distance learning plan, or you're doing the distance learning stuff, but your IEP's not till September or October, you can call an IEP now. You can call an IEP and request that, and tell your district team that you're having concerns, and to figure out what you're going to do to address those concerns. Also, on April 23rd, we had a distance learning webinar that specifically focused on addressing mental health and behavior. And so on the CDE website, we have not only the webinar we just did, but there was a whole series around mental health and behavior that has a whole bunch of resources that can also provide more information for you as well, for the parent as well. And we've also heard of providers of mental health services. A lot of them are moving to virtual. And so that also has opened up a lot more options as well. So thank you for that question, because ensuring the health and welfare and well-being of our students is primary. And we all know that we can't learn if we are not in a social emotional place to do so. So Steve, really appreciate the question.
Absolutely. Thank you for your answer. And the other question is from a parent of an 8-year-old with autism and ID. And the parent, the daughter, is having difficulty participating in the online learning lessons. And it's tough because they're working full-time from home, the parent is. Can the parent request that academic, speech, and OT assessments be done right away when on-site school resumes, so the IEP team can determine how to provide compensatory services to help address the regression that might happen?
Yeah, so again, you can request an IEP at any time. I think we're not exactly sure when on-site will return at this point, but the stay-at-home order, I think, is going to continue to vary across counties, making the face-to-face assessments challenging. But it is possible to get some assessments done virtually. And I would say that that in terms of you talked about to help the regression and all that. Some of what's going to happen is when students come back to school, the IP teams will have to just get together and figure out what makes sense for each individual student. I don't think there's going to be a blanket, I missed this many hours, and so I'm owed this many hours. This is FAPE in the LRE during COVID, and it's going to be a lot of things considered that will be based on individual students and what their needs are. And so the IEP team is going to be never more critical, and our communication with families also never more critical. But I would say to parents, don't wait. If you have concerns, talk to your school team and figure out how to address those. Because the one thing we don't want is for people to feel frustrated and not heard. So, I think at this point, our school teams are also pressed. And I know even my own school team are also trying to do childcare while they're trying to provide services. So, a little understanding probably during this time is warranted, but I totally get, what they're saying. We want to make sure that we've worked so hard as families to try to make sure that our kids get everything that they need. And we should continue to do that in light of all this.
Just going to jump in here quickly for a moment. For those of you who missed the information at the beginning about the two different languages, we're simultaneously interpreting through Spanish. If you are listening to two languages at the same time, if you go to at the bottom of your screen, the interpretation icon, select the language you want to listen to, and then go back to the spot where the icon was and select mute original audio. That may clear up the problem. If there is no mute original audio and it's driving you crazy, you can switch to closed captioning instead. Not all Zooms work the same on every format. So thanks for bearing with us, and I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, Kristin.
Hi.
So I'm Jen Dote from EPU Children's Center in Central Valley. We heard from Catherine's parents. They said online therapy is not beneficial for our daughter at this time, and we wonder if we can suspend the offer of services until we return to in-person therapy. If we do this, can we make up for the lost time when we return to in-person services?
I think that's going to be a decision that's made for each IEP team, depending on the unique circumstances of each and every child. So again, like I said, there's going to have to be a lot of different considerations, like what's feasible even for the child, and also, looking at what the goals are, and if there's been any kind of regression, there'll just be a lot of things that are considered. And, I understand about some students have a more difficult time with online. Absolutely. And so, in some ways, it has been helpful, at least in my own situation, to do much more shortened online, to at least as a parent be able to keep up on some things at home, or maybe even scheduling a time where you're working without the student, where a parent can at least get some things that we can just keep in place to keep the regression from getting further. And I know that is a lot of pressure on parents. I feel a great deal of pressure to keep everything going as well. And there's just some things that I won't, but it has been helpful to be able to reach out and be able to talk to some of the related service providers, and even finding out some of the things that they do that happen in settings outside of my house that I wasn't aware of, that I can help support. So thanks for the question, Jen.
Thanks, Kristin.
Hi, Kristin.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good to see you, Joe.
Good to see you as well. My name is Joe Goyos, and I am with Support for Families of Children with Disabilities in San Francisco. And our first question comes from a parent of a high school student who asked, and there's a couple of questions within this question, but I'll go ahead and read the whole thing out. Is there a long-term plan? I know we can't predict when we'll go back to school buildings, or if they may be a new wave of infections in the fall. So with much uncertainty, are we thinking of a plan B or plan C, et cetera, in connection with ESY, the fall, and et cetera? If we go back, will there be new expectations? Will staff and students have to wear masks? Any other safeguards?
These are all the same questions that educators and administrators and our CDE superintendent, our CDE staff and superintendent are all wondering the same thing. I think right now we have been convening at the state level. I know our superintendent and deputy superintendent have been convening with a lot of our local superintendents to try to start answering some of these questions. I don't think at the beginning, I don't think any of us had expected this to go on. I think we kind of thought this was a 2-week thing. So we're behaving like this was, okay, let's get through this and we'll move on to the next thing. Not how are we going to think about doing things really differently. And maybe that was good in some ways because it wasn't so scary at first, because I don't know how I would have felt if I would have realized that it would have gone on this long at first. You just walk through every day, kind of trying to make it through each day the best you can. But it was announced last week that work group started, and much of it will be decided locally based on local context and the local community. And all contingency plans are being considered at this point in time, and the data is being looked at to inform future decisions. But I don't think it's not going to be a one size fits all. We're communicating often with our SELPAs, the State Department is, and so we will continue to do that to walk through and sort of troubleshoot. It's our job, especially my job in the special ed division and some of the meetings that I'm in, to make sure that the needs of students with disabilities and their families are represented, so that all the decisions that are being made are made with the consideration of our students. And and I know our SELPA directors are doing the same thing in the larger meetings that they're having with all of their superintendents, so that we consider the needs. Sometimes it's said that if you consider the needs of your students with the most significant disabilities, it helps you plan for all students well to have access and to be thinking about all the things instead of trying to fix it later. And so that's sort of the mentality going into this, is how can we plan for all of our students, and maybe starting with our most difficult students to serve, and then moving from that, because we know what we don't want is, we've made so much progress as a state around starting to really shift around the inclusion of individuals with disabilities, both in our schools as well as in the workplace. We don't want to take any steps backwards there. So in terms of the long-term plan, it is ever evolving. I think we just heard today that we'll be moving on Friday into phase 2, which is good news because things can start opening up some. It gives us a little bit more option to start having the world get a little bit more back to normal. So it's a good step as we move through all the phases that the governor talked about. But the honest truth is this is ever evolving. And, we plan to continue to work with you guys at the PTIs, as well as the SELPAs and the rest of our district superintendents and others, to make sure that everything's considered in all this. And, from a parent perspective, I hope the parents will continue to check in with you all to let you know how they're experiencing this, because it's the only way that we know how this is rolling out, is how it feels from parents and how it affects them.
Thank you. And then our second question was from a parent as well of a student with a disability, who asked, do you have statistics about access and participation of students at this point, especially in relation to special education students? And then with those special education students of color, we're hearing at our school that there are families that are simply not participating in distance learning at all.
So we don't have a big data set on who is and who's not participating, and I imagine that data will come in more and more. Although we do know that that disproportionately in California, students of color are disproportionately represented in special education, and we're constantly working towards trying to sort of address those equity issues. And so I think, things like this sort of bring to light even more of our disadvantaged populations. And I think we do have to be really careful about making sure that we keep aware and that we are looking at the data, and that we make sure to continue to address and not shy away from addressing those inequalities. And I know it's big on the agenda of our superintendent. It's actually front of mind, both in closing the achievement gap and making sure that we do not have populations that are left out in any way. So I really appreciate that question.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Paula.
West Hernandez from Task. A parent with an 8-year-old son who receives specialized academic instruction, SAI, for math, language arts, and science is concerned that her child has received the same packets as students in general education to complete, even though he wasn't introduced to that material prior to school closures. Her son received modified curriculum and work prior to online instruction. The parent has reached out to both the general education and special education teachers, but only the general education teacher has responded. Can students in SAI or special day classes be expected to complete the same level of packets as general education students when they haven't been introduced to that level of information? How can they make progress when they don't understand the material?
Yeah, this is a good question, because I think one of the core tenets and expectations around IDEA is access, and ensuring that students with disabilities have access. So whatever is provided to all students, such as a packet of work, there does need to be something that's equitable, but it doesn't mean it's exactly the same thing without the appropriate accommodations or modifications made to it. So I would recommend first you reach out to the school principal, and then the special ed director, and then your SELPA director, and let them know the concerns, and that that the child has not been getting the access that they need to be able to access their learning, and it's reasonable to expect that there's work to be done and an attempt to be made to allow that student access. I think this whole COVID incident has, I think, brought to the forefront some of the accessibility challenges in general, and that when we're highly dependent on people, I know for my own family and my own daughter, it certainly gave me a kick in the pants around making sure that we spend more time on just being able to access technology, so it's not it's not so abrupt, and that we do a little bit more blended to be able to get her more used to interacting with people through video and things like that is something that we hadn't really done. And so going back to the access thing, I think, as we now reflect on what we're learning here, I think what we're learning here is we have to plan for this type of thing to happen in the future, because it may also open up some opportunities for access. And I recently had a conversation with Microsoft about their new accessibility tools, and I had previously had one with Apple, and the things that they have embedded, even around language and lots of different kinds of accommodations for students, is pretty remarkable. But those, you already have to know about them. And so as parents, if we don't know about them, it's kind of hard to think about how they would work within the context of helping our kids access their daily curriculum. But if it's part of what our kids know and we know, I think it would be a lot more helpful. I know that was a little bit of a bird walk, but I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Thank you for the question.
All righty, I have a second question from Paula West Hernandez of Task.
We received a call from a mother and father who made moderate living prior to shelter in place. Both parents are now unemployed and are struggling to make it financially. The district recently gave some students laptops to use, but their children weren't given any. When the parents called the school to find out why, they were told that the laptops were given to students who are on the lunch program. It's understandable that not all districts are going to be able to provide technology to all students during school closures. Are there programs to help these parents and others like them obtain technology so their children can participate in virtual instruction?
So I think the answer to that's twofold. One, there definitely, like I talked about before, are statewide efforts making sure everyone has access to technology. But also, as a student with a disability, it's important that the students are able to access their education as well. So, part of that might be an IEP conversation. And you may want to also reach out to your district special ed director, SELPA director, and let them know that, the children aren't able to access their education, and that is part of what we expect to have happen for students if all students are accessing their education that way, or that there is a mechanism in place for the students to access their education. So it's a good question. I still think we definitely are still working on getting access to everyone in the state, but it probably would be a good idea to make sure to let your administrators know that that's also an issue, and don't just wait, but go ahead and give your IEP team lead a call. Thank you for that question.
Hi, Kristin. My name is Rosa Felix, and I'm from PHP, and I have two questions for you tonight. The first one, we've been hearing from families who have seen a drastic reduction in their related services. For example, instead of 2 hours per week of speech, they may just be receiving 15 minutes of speech via Zoom. What are family rights during this time?
That's a really good question. That's probably one of the questions that we're getting the most, is around that change in how much time. And, there's such a balance between the time that we had before and getting this either the same amount of time, or also recognizing whether or not and how much our kids are benefiting from a different modality, like getting it through online, and even the availability of some of that in some of our districts. So the answer to that would be, you have the right to call an IEP meeting to discuss your student's education at any time. So, and along with that, I would recommend that everyone, both, the schools and the families, document all the things that you are doing, right? To make sure that, that you both memorialize it, and that you also are able to talk about what worked and what didn't work. Again, students are still entitled to a free, appropriate education, but during COVID, that may look different than your traditional IEP, right? So you may not be receiving all the same services in the same way you did before. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily being denied something, but that's going to be something that the IEP teams are going to have to talk about once school resumes, to figure out what the best mechanism for either making up time, or if the student has had a new regression. And there'll be situations where, sometimes the parents may not want to have all those hours made up, because it may not be in the best interest of the student to do that. I think it's just really individualized. I mentioned this earlier, I think, but OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, has clarified that during COVID, the federal law allows for flexibility, I'm reading this, for flexibility in determining how to meet the individual needs of students with disabilities, and that the determination of how FAPE is to be provided may need to be different in this time of unprecedented national emergency. So it's been recognized by the federal government, at the Office of Special Education Programs, at the U.S. Department of Education, that that this will look different. The expectation is that everyone isn't going to have every single thing exactly the way they had it in their IEP, because we're on this sort of pause where all students are not getting all of their education and general education either. We're in a pandemic, and we're sort of doing the best we can to the best of our ability. And recently, Secretary DeVos, who is the Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education, declined to recommend to Congress that that grants any waivers under the authority of IDEA. So, you still have rights as a parent, but I can't recommend more the importance of working with your IEP team to find something that works for your child during this time. And then when everything comes back to normal, we revisit where everyone is at and create something that works for everyone. And hopefully we won't have to, be at odds. We'll be working in partnership, because I think all of us, and I know as a parent, it definitely feels better to be working in partnership than working in an adversarial relationship with our districts and our schools. But that said, you always have the right, and all the procedural safeguards will remain in place under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that's important.
Great. Thank you, Kristin.
Yeah.
My next question is, my child cannot work independently at all, so during distant learning, and I have to work. What can I do?
Yeah, that has become an issue for all parents. Yeah. But especially so for parents of kids with disabilities. especially kids that need a significant amount of support. And I know for our families that have kids that require one-to-one, 24-hour day support, this has become hugely challenging. And so I would say, communicating your concerns to your school and SELPA. If you want to, talk to your IEP team or your whoever that is that directly supervises your child's case, whether that's your special ed teacher or program specialist. And I think you have to share those concerns and let them know what's going on. And as a team, that's what a team is for, is to help brainstorm and figure out, individualized solutions. And I think it's never been more important than it is now to look at that I in individualized. There's no, and I think that's one of the things I talked to Maria about before I did this town hall was, this is not going to be a one size fits all approach. This is going to be individualized, depending on each child and family, them working with their teams, and us all being understanding of the situation that we're in. And when this is all sort of, said and done, hopefully in this, sooner in the fall, we'll regroup, we'll see where we're at. And every kid is going to may need some sort of remediation, not will need, but may need some sort of remediation, including our students with disabilities. And our school systems, and as a state, we're going to have to address that somehow. It just, those details, and we're working out how that will actually happen. And I know some folks have asked a lot of questions about extended school year, and that too is going to be more of a local decision on what works for each individual district, depending on when their shelter in place is lifted, what they're dealing with their rates of COVID and all those things. So it's an important question. Let me make sure I covered everything around that. We do have a lot of resources on the CDE website as well. And again, you're all always welcome to reach out to us, but we think you'll get the most bang for your buck if you really reach out to your local districts and teams. I mean, they're working, they're there to support you. And we know as special ed folks that we are not, we always have a lot of ideas, and some of them may work and some of them may not. But I think during this time, it's an all hands on deck, and we're trying a lot of new things. And I think, I hope that out of this, we'll learn a lot of new things about ourselves and about our kids, and about the system. And I've already learned a lot of things about what I will do differently moving forward once I have time to actually sit down and sort of reinvent. You see some of those futuristic rooms where people can appear as whole people on the wall, and you wonder, is that going to be us? And would that make more sense if the people were a little bigger than the size of a Barbie? Maybe she would think that was something that was real. So I think a lot of opportunity there. And thank you so much for the question. And thank all of you for the questions. And again, I've seen a lot of questions come up in the chat, and we'll do our best to try to continue to put out answers to those questions, because I know it's important for you to hear. And we'll also put them, we'll work with our SELPA directors, which I said we work with them every single week, because they are supporting the districts that support you. And so we're providing them information and answers. We know you need that too. So we'll continue to work with our parent training and information centers and our family empowerment centers to do the same. But I do think we're better together in all this. So thank you so much for hosting this, and let me know if you have any other questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's a really honor. I'm going to turn it over to Maria now. Thank you, Kristin.
Actually, we have one final question from Susan.
Okay.
Hi, Kristin. This is Susan Henderson from Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund in Berkeley. I'm trying to start my video. There we go. Hi, everybody. So I saw this same question pop up in the chat room, and I wouldn't be surprised if you've already heard it. We have families telling us that their districts are telling them that they don't have to hold any IEP meetings until they're back at a brick and mortar place. So I was wondering we were wondering what CDE's views are about this and how you can let the districts know about your views. Thanks.
Sure. So it's a great question. And I think, like I said before, the IDEA is still absolutely in place. And so the right to have an IEP may not be us all sitting in the same building, but I've heard a lot of parents recently. In fact, I just talked to one yesterday who had, I think, 9 of her IEP team in a gallery and had one of the best IEP meetings they'd had in a long time, because, everyone was there, and she said no one had to leave. And, but overall, there's no reason that anyone has to wait from a state perspective to have an IEP meeting when everything resumes. Technically, districts are open, and so we're happy to work with our SELPAs. I know that they're providing great advice to their districts, and they're all very aware that IEPs can continue to occur. We know that there will be some issues around some of the assessments. I know there are been some questions about how can all assessments be done, virtually. And we know that presents some challenges, but that even though that presents some challenges, the timelines and the fact that we do need to continue to transition kids. My own daughter's transitioning out of the school system this summer. She's still turning 22 and still transitioning, just like we have our kids that are our children that are transitioning out of the regional centers into our K-12 system. So we recognize that's challenging. We also recognize it might take more time, right? So there will be circumstances where it may take a little bit more time, but that's where the communication with families comes in, that we're working in partnership with families to make sure that that children continue to get their services, that they continue to work closely with their IEP teams. And we do this to the best of our ability. And there'll be situations that come up that are out of the norm that we'll work out individually. But as a state, back to your original question, Susan, as a state, we do expect that that business continues and that IEPs continue to be held, and they can definitely be held virtually. And if they can't be held virtually, and that's because we're having connection problems or something, then those will be unique circumstances that have to be dealt with individually. But overall, the expectation is that business continues.
Thanks, Kristin.
All right. State Director Wright, any final comments before we wrap up?
Those were hard questions. I just want to let you know. But I hope that I gave you the answers to the best of my ability to do that today. And again, if you know where to find me. If you have additional questions or hear from families that something wasn't clear, please reach out. And just know that in the special ed division at the California Department of Education, we have so many folks that work for us, our consultants and our analysts and our administrative staff. We are all, and our complaints investigators, we are all parents. Many of us are parents of children with disabilities, just like those who work at our parent training and information centers. And this work is passion work for us. We take it very seriously. We appreciate so much what parents are doing out there to keep everything going. We know it's not easy, but you're not in this alone. Again, you have the state on your side. You also have our wonderful SELPA directors and your teachers and your folks in the district. So please reach out to them, and thanks for tuning in tonight. And I hope to talk to you all soon.
All right. Thank you, Director Wright, for joining us tonight and for your thoughtful answers to some really challenging questions. We were joined tonight by over 600 parents throughout California. Thank you all for joining with us. We hope this has been helpful to you. Your California Parent Training Information Center staff are here to support you during these unsettling times. So please, if you'd like to speak to a Parent Training and Information Center staff person, find the center closest to you on the screen, and you can reach out to them via phone or email. And as a reminder, for more information, please visit the links to the CDE website on the PowerPoint slide and in the chat bar. Also, we will share questions that have been posed over chat with Director Wright and the California State Department of Education. For those who submitted questions that were not answered during the presentation, we will share those questions with Director Wright, and we are in close communication with the state. As more information is released, we will share it with you. Stay well and safe, everyone. We wish all your families the very best.